You're about to discover something that will fundamentally change how you exist in this world. And I need to warn you, once you understand this, there's no going back to the comfortable lies you've been living. Right now, someone with half your intelligence is commanding twice your respect. Someone with less talent is securing opportunities you're being passed over for. Someone who knows less is speaking with more authority than you've ever dared to claim. And it's not because they're better than you. It's because they learned something Machiavelli understood 500 years ago, something that was deliberately kept from you while you were being taught to be nice, to wait your turn, to hope someone would eventually recognize your worth. I'm going to share with you the exact psychological mechanism that separates those who command fearless confidence from those who beg for validation. This isn't motivation. This isn't theory. This is a surgical dissection of how power actually operates in human interactions. By the end of this, you won't just understand confidence differently. You'll embody it so completely that your presence will shift the energy of every space you occupy. The deception you've been fed. Let me tell you what nobody else will. You've been lied to about what confidence actually is. They told you confidence comes from positive thinking, from affirmations, from believing in yourself. They sold you the idea that if you just worked on your self-esteem, practiced power poses, and repeated mantras in the mirror, you'd somehow develop unshakable confidence. That's not just wrong. It's weaponized nonsense designed to keep you chasing an internal feeling while others build external empires. Here's what Machiavelli actually understood. Confidence isn't something you feel. It's something others perceive based on how you handle power, information, and resistance. In The Prince, Machiavelli wrote, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see, but few can feel. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." This is the key that unlocks everything. People don't respond to how confident you feel inside. They respond to how you appear when you exercise power, when you're challenged, when circumstances test you. True confidence isn't built in your mind. It's demonstrated through specific behavioral patterns that signal to others you cannot be intimidated, manipulated, or controlled. The Machiavellian Foundation, understanding fear versus respect. Machiavelli's most misunderstood quote is this: "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." Most people read this and think Machiavelli advocated being cruel or tyrannical. That's a fundamental misunderstanding that has kept this knowledge from those who could benefit from it most. What Machiavelli actually meant was this: the confidence that cannot be shaken comes from knowing that people respect your boundaries, your standards, and your consequences, not from hoping they like you enough to treat you well. Fear, in the Machiavellian sense, doesn't mean terror. It means respect for what you will and won't accept. It means people understanding that crossing certain lines with you will have definite consequences. I learned this the most painful way possible. For years, I built my entire identity around being liked. I thought if I was agreeable enough, helpful enough, accommodating enough, people would naturally respect me. I confused niceness with strength and availability with value. The wake-up call came in a meeting where I watched someone blatantly take credit for work I had done. I said nothing because I didn't want to make the situation uncomfortable. I convinced myself that eventually the truth would come out, that karma would handle it, that being the bigger person meant staying silent. That person got promoted. I got overlooked. Again. That night, I realized something that changed everything. My desire to be liked had made me completely powerless. My fear of other people's discomfort had made me a doormat dressed up in professional clothing. The first Machiavellian principle, the strategic use of silence. Machiavelli observed that those who talk the most reveal the most, while those who speak carefully control the most. Here's what this actually looks like in practice. Every word you speak is information you're giving away about your position, your knowledge, your intentions, and your weaknesses. The person who feels compelled to fill every silence, to explain every decision, to justify every choice is the person who is terrified of what others might think in the absence of constant explanation. This was my first area of transformation. I started treating silence not as something to be filled, but as a tool to be deployed. In negotiations, instead of rushing to make my case, I would present my position and then stop talking. The silence that followed was excruciating at first, but I forced myself to sit in it. And something remarkable happened. The other person, unable to tolerate the silence, would start talking. And in their discomfort, they would reveal their bottom line, their pressure points, their real motivations. They would negotiate against themselves while I sat there, calm and observant. Machiavelli wrote in his discourses, "Wise men say, and not without reason, that whoever wishes to foresee the future must consult the past." This applies to conversations perfectly. When you're silent, you're not just avoiding giving information away. You're collecting data about who you're dealing with. You're learning their patterns, their tells, their weaknesses. The confident person doesn't need to prove they're smart by constantly demonstrating their knowledge. They prove they're powerful by controlling the flow and volume of information in every interaction. Practice this immediately. In your next conversation where someone is trying to get something from you, say less. Present your position clearly and concisely, then stop. Don't explain. Don't justify. Don't fill the uncomfortable pause. Watch what happens. You'll see people start working harder to convince you. You'll notice them revealing more than they intended to. You'll feel the power shift from them extracting information from you to you, evaluating information they're voluntarily providing. This is the first layer of Machiavellian confidence. Understanding that silence is not the absence of power, it's the presence of control. The second principle, emotional fortification. Machiavelli observed, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." What does this mean for emotional control? The fool eventually learns not to react to every provocation after being manipulated repeatedly. The wise person learns this lesson immediately by observing human nature. Here's the brutal truth about emotional reactions. Every time you respond emotionally to someone's provocation, you're showing them exactly how to control you in the future. When you get angry, you reveal your trigger points. When you get defensive, you reveal your insecurities. When you get upset, you reveal that your emotional state is controlled by external circumstances rather than internal standards. 3 years ago, someone I trusted completely betrayed me. They shared private information I had confided in them in a room full of colleagues, twisting my words to make themselves look better at my expense. My first instinct was volcanic rage. I wanted to explode, to expose them, to make them feel even a fraction of what they had made me feel. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was intuition. But I remembered something Machiavelli wrote, "Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception." I realized that my emotional reaction was exactly what they wanted. They wanted me to lose control, to look unstable, to prove that I was the problem they had painted me to be. So I did nothing. I sat there with a completely neutral expression while they performed their character assassination. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I didn't react. The silence was deafening. And in that silence, something beautiful happened. Other people in the room started to feel uncomfortable with the betrayer's performance. Without me saying a single word, my calm demeanor made their theatrical accusations look increasingly desperate and suspicious. Within a week, 3 people from that meeting reached out to me privately to tell me they knew what had really happened and respected how I handled it. This is Machiavellian emotional fortification. Understanding that your lack of reaction is more powerful than any defense you could mount. When you refuse to be provoked, you demonstrate that you cannot be controlled. Here's how to build this capacity. Start viewing your emotions as information rather than commands. When someone says something that triggers anger, instead of immediately acting on that anger, pause and ask yourself, what is this person trying to accomplish by provoking this reaction in me? Once you see the manipulation attempt clearly, you can choose whether to give them what they want, your emotional reaction, or what they've earned, your strategic response or complete indifference. Machiavelli wrote, "Men are so simple and so ready to obey present necessities, that one who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived." Don't be the person who allows themselves to be deceived by emotional manipulation. Be the person who sees the attempt clearly and responds strategically rather than reactively. The third principle, Calculated transparency. This is where most people misunderstand Machiavellian strategy completely. They think it means being secretive, paranoid, or dishonest. That's not strategy. That's incompetence wrapped in suspicion. Machiavelli's actual insight was far more sophisticated. Control what information you reveal, when you reveal it, and to whom you reveal it. I used to be an open book. I thought transparency was virtue and sharing was connection. I told people my plans, my struggles, my strategies, my fears. I mistook oversharing for authenticity. Then I noticed something devastating. Every piece of information I shared was being used to categorize me, limit me, or compete with me. When I shared my struggles, people didn't see resilience. They saw weakness. When I shared my plans, people didn't see vision. They saw opportunity to copy or undermine. When I shared my fears, people didn't see humanity. They saw leverage. Machiavelli observed, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." The fool eventually learns to be selective about what they share after being burned repeatedly. The wise person is selective from the beginning. Here's the framework I developed. Information comes in 3 categories. Public information. Things that enhance your reputation and create the perception you want. Your achievements, your standards, your values when they serve your positioning. Private information. Your actual strategies, your current challenges, your detailed plans. This is shared only with people who have earned access through demonstrated loyalty and mutual benefit. Secret information. Your vulnerabilities, your deepest fears, your pressure points. This is guarded absolutely and shared only with people whose success is inextricably tied to yours. Most people treat all information as public information. They share everything with everyone and then wonder why they're constantly being undermined, copied, or manipulated. The Machiavellian approach is different. You deliberately create a public persona that serves your goals while keeping your actual methods, motivations, and vulnerabilities protected. This isn't dishonesty. This is strategy. Machiavelli wrote extensively about the difference between how things are and how they appear. The prince who is both good and appears good will be destroyed by those who appear good but are not. The prince who is good but appears to be whatever the situation requires will thrive. Apply this to your own life. You don't owe everyone access to your inner world. You don't owe anyone a detailed explanation of your strategies. You don't owe people transparency about your challenges when they haven't earned the privilege of your vulnerability. Start practicing calculated transparency immediately. Before you share anything about yourself, ask, what does this person need to know? And how does sharing this information serve my goals? When people ask probing questions about your plans, learn to give satisfying non-answers. I'm exploring several options and will decide when I have all the information I need. This sounds like transparency while revealing absolutely nothing actionable. The 4th principle, demonstrated competence. Machiavelli wrote, "There is no other way to guard yourself against flattery than by making men understand that telling you the truth will not offend you." But here's the part people miss. The only way to make truth-telling safe is to be so undeniably competent that the truth can't diminish you. This is the foundation that makes all other Machiavellian principles work. You must be genuinely, undeniably good at something that matters. Confidence without competence is delusion. Strategy without skill is fantasy. Presence without performance is just expensive air. I learned this when I tried to negotiate for a promotion based on how hard I worked and how long I'd been at the company. My boss looked at me and said something that destroyed me. "I can replace what you do in 3 weeks. Give me a reason why I can't." I had nothing. I had confused activity with achievement and presence with production. I had been working hard but not working strategically. I had been busy but not valuable. That moment became the catalyst for complete transformation. I stopped trying to be the hardest worker and started becoming the most valuable player. Here's what that actually required. I studied my industry until I knew things that people with twice my experience didn't know. I identified the problems that everyone accepted as just how things are and developed solutions for them. I made myself the person who made everything around me function better, smoother, more profitably. Machiavelli observed that the prince who relies on mercenaries will always be vulnerable because their loyalty is for hire. The prince who develops their own strength becomes unshakable. Apply this to yourself. Stop relying on other people's opinions of you and start building undeniable evidence of your value. Your competence should be so obvious that people who dislike you still have to acknowledge your worth. Your skills should be so valuable that people who disagree with your methods still need your results. This is what creates the foundation for fearless confidence. When you know with absolute certainty that you can produce results that matter, other people's opinions become data rather than verdicts. When someone criticizes your approach, you can evaluate whether their critique has merit without your ego being tied to the outcome. When someone questions your judgment, you can consider their perspective without needing to defend yourself because your track record speaks louder than their skepticism. Machiavelli's princes didn't rely on people liking them. They relied on being necessary. Make yourself necessary through excellence and watch how quickly confidence stops being something you try to feel and starts being something others perceive in everything you do. The fifth principle, strategic ruthlessness. This is where we separate those who want to feel powerful from those who want to be powerful. This is where most people stop reading because they're not ready to hear what real confidence actually requires. Machiavelli wrote, "A prince must not worry about the charge of cruelty when it is a matter of keeping his subjects united and loyal." Now, before you misunderstand this completely, let me be crystal clear. This is not about being cruel to people. This is about being ruthless with your priorities. The hard truth is this: your time, energy, and attention are finite. Every yes to one thing is a no to something else. Every hour you spend on someone else's priority is an hour you can't spend on your own. Most people lack confidence because they've given away their power in 1,000 small decisions to prioritize other people's comfort over their own growth. 3 years ago, I had to remove someone from my life who I deeply cared about. They weren't a bad person. They were just a person whose problems had become my full-time job while my own goals sat unattended. Every conversation was them explaining why their life wasn't working. Every interaction was them draining my emotional energy to fuel their drama. Every moment I spent with them was a moment I couldn't invest in my own advancement. I kept making excuses for them because I confused loyalty with enabling. I kept giving them my time because I confused friendship with obligation. The breakthrough came when I asked myself a Machiavellian question. If this person disappeared from my life tomorrow, would I be more or less likely to achieve my goals? The answer was devastating and clarifying. More likely. Significantly more likely. That's when I understood what Machiavelli meant about necessary ruthlessness. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is remove yourself from their life, so they're forced to develop the strength they'll never build while you're carrying them. And sometimes the most important thing you can do for yourself is protect your energy from people who drain it, even when they're not malicious, just misaligned with where you're going. Strategic ruthlessness means saying no to people you care about when what they're asking for doesn't align with where you're going. Ending relationships that drain your energy even when those people haven't done anything wrong. Making decisions that disappoint others when those decisions serve your long-term goals. Prioritizing your mission over other people's comfort with your choices. This isn't cruelty. This is boundaries. This isn't selfishness. This is self-preservation. This isn't being a bad person. This is being a person with a purpose that matters more than being liked. Machiavelli observed, "Since it is difficult to join them together, it is safer to be feared than loved when one of the two must be lacking." In modern terms, since it's difficult to both pursue your goals and keep everyone comfortable with your choices, it's safer to be respected for your boundaries than loved for your availability. When you develop strategic ruthlessness, something remarkable happens to your confidence. You stop being afraid of other people's disappointment because you've already decided that your goals matter more than their temporary discomfort. You stop being afraid of saying no because you understand that every no to something that doesn't serve you is a yes to something that does. You stop being afraid of people's reactions because you've accepted that disappointing some people is the price of not disappointing yourself. This is what fearless confidence actually looks like. Not the absence of fear, but the presence of priorities that matter more than fear. The integration, becoming untouchable. Now let me show you how these principles work together to create the kind of confidence that cannot be shaken, questioned, or diminished by external circumstances. Machiavelli's genius wasn't in individual tactics. It was in understanding how multiple principles create synergistic power when applied together. Here's how it works. Your strategic silence forces others to reveal their intentions while you reveal nothing. This gives you information advantage. Your emotional fortification prevents others from manipulating you through provocation. This gives you psychological advantage. Your calculated transparency controls what people know about you and when they know it. This gives you strategic advantage. Your demonstrated competence makes you necessary rather than merely likable. This gives you positional advantage. Your strategic ruthlessness protects your resources from those who would drain them. This gives you energetic advantage. When these 5 principles operate together, you become what Machiavelli called the new prince, someone who creates their own power rather than inheriting it, someone who commands respect rather than begging for it, someone who shapes circumstances rather than being shaped by them. Let me give you a real example of how this works. 2 years ago, I was offered a position that would have been a significant title upgrade but would have required me to abandon a project I believed in. The person making the offer was someone I respected and didn't want to disappoint. Old me would have said yes immediately because I was afraid of missing an opportunity and afraid of disappointing someone in a position of power. But I had developed these Machiavellian principles by then. So here's what actually happened. Strategic silence. Instead of immediately accepting or rejecting, I simply said, "Tell me more about what you need from this role." Then I stopped talking. In the silence, they revealed this was actually a position nobody else wanted because it was a political nightmare. Emotional fortification. When they tried to create urgency by implying the offer might disappear, I didn't react with fear. I simply acknowledged the timeline without changing my evaluation process. Calculated transparency. I didn't explain why I was hesitant or share my concerns. I simply said I needed time to consider how this aligned with my current commitments. Demonstrated competence. My track record gave me leverage. They knew I could succeed in the role, which meant they needed me more than I needed them. Strategic ruthlessness. I ultimately declined because the opportunity, while impressive on paper, didn't serve my actual goals. I prioritized my mission over their approval. The result. 3 months later, they came back with a better offer that allowed me to continue my project while taking on new responsibilities. They respected my boundaries because I had demonstrated I had boundaries worth respecting. This is what Machiavellian confidence actually creates. Not arrogance, not aggression, but the calm certainty that you control your own value and no one else gets to define it for you. The warning. Why most people won't do this. Now here's the part most motivational content won't tell you. Most people who read this will do absolutely nothing with this information. They'll agree with it intellectually. They'll feel inspired temporarily. Then they'll go right back to seeking approval, explaining themselves to people who aren't listening, tolerating disrespect because it's easier than enforcing boundaries, and wondering why they still lack confidence. Machiavelli understood this about human nature. It must be considered that there is nothing more difficult to carry out, nor more doubtful of success, nor more dangerous to handle, than to initiate a new order of things. Becoming fearlessly confident requires initiating a new order in how you operate. And that's terrifying because it means people who are used to you being accommodating will be uncomfortable when you start setting boundaries. Relationships built on you accepting less than you deserve will end when you start demanding what you're worth. Opportunities that required you to diminish yourself will disappear when you start taking up your full space. Most people would rather stay confidently uncomfortable in their familiar weakness than become temporarily uncomfortable while building real strength. But you're still reading. Which means some part of you recognizes that everything I've described is exactly what you've been searching for but couldn't articulate. The implementation, your next 30 days. Here's exactly how to begin applying these principles immediately. Week 1, the silence practice. In every conversation this week, speak 30% less than you normally would. Before you offer your opinion, Wait to see if anyone asks for it. Before you explain yourself, notice if explanation is actually necessary or if you're just uncomfortable with silence. Week 2, the emotional audit. Document every time someone's words or actions trigger an emotional reaction in you. Don't judge the reaction, just observe it. Then ask, what were they trying to accomplish with this provocation? This builds the awareness needed for emotional fortification. Week 3, the information control. Before you share anything about yourself this week, ask, what does this person need to know? And how does sharing this serve my goals? Practice giving non-answers that sound like transparency while revealing nothing strategic. Week 4, the competence acceleration. Identify one skill that would make you significantly more valuable in your field. Commit 30 minutes daily to developing it. This isn't about feeling more confident, it's about building the foundation that makes confidence inevitable. Throughout all 30 days, practice strategic ruthlessness by saying no to at least one request per day that doesn't serve your goals, even if saying no disappoints someone. The truth about fearless confidence. Let me end by telling you what Machiavelli really understood about confidence. It's not a feeling you chase. It's a byproduct of living according to your own standards rather than other people's expectations. When you control information instead of oversharing, you naturally feel more confident because you're not vulnerable to others using your openness against you. When you master your emotional reactions instead of being controlled by them, you naturally feel more confident because you know no one can manipulate you into acting against your interests. When you demonstrate genuine competence instead of just trying to be likable, you naturally feel more confident because your value is undeniable regardless of who does or doesn't recognize it. When you protect your energy through strategic ruthlessness instead of trying to accommodate everyone, you naturally feel more confident because you're investing in what actually matters rather than draining yourself on what doesn't. Machiavelli's final insight that most people miss: it is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles. Your confidence doesn't come from external validation, impressive titles, or other people's approval. It comes from knowing with absolute certainty that you have developed the capacity to handle whatever circumstances present themselves. You don't need anyone's permission to become fearlessly confident. You never did. You just needed someone to tell you the truth about how power, perception, and confidence actually work instead of feeding you comfortable lies about positive thinking and self-belief. The Machiavellian path to fearless confidence isn't about becoming someone else. It's about removing all the conditioning that convinced you to be less than what you're capable of becoming. You already have everything you need. The only question is, are you finally ready to stop asking permission and start taking what's yours? The world is divided into two types of people: those who shape circumstances and those who are shaped by them. Machiavelli wrote his principles for the first group. Now you have them too. What you do with this knowledge will determine everything that comes next. Choose wisely. Choose powerfully. Choose now.